Hello and welcome to the Georgia Road Schoolhouse. This schoolhouse is the third building that was built on the site. It was built in 1862. The original schoolhouse was built in 1735. The property was on a land grant from the King of England to the proprietors of East Jersey, and it was to be used for religious and educational purposes only in perpetuity. The king was told by his aunt and uncle, William and Mary, that this was what needed to be done, and he did it. So this is the last schoolhouse that was built. We had originally 11 acres of land here. We do have a woodshed, and we do have an outhouse. The outhouse is actually two different outhouses. One was for the teacher and one was for the students. And the students had 3 holes in the bench. There was the little hole for the smaller kids, the medium hole for the bigger kids, and the bigger hole for the older kids. So we feel pretty special about having that kind of an outhouse on our property. So come on in and let's see what life was like in this schoolhouse in 1862. Of course, we have the desks are from about 1850. The wooden double desks were built by an Eagle Scout from Freehold Township, Andrew O'Sullivan. He actually went up to Vermont and got the wood for these desks, and it would have been 2 to a bench. The slate boards are what they used instead of paper and ink, because paper was very expensive and ink was also very expensive. So they are just a piece of slate with a wood piece around them, and if you write your name on the board with the slate pencil, that is how it comes out. And then when you need to erase it, you just go like that. And that's how they learned their lessons back in the 1860s, all the way up until probably the 1920s. The other desks are a hodgepodge, this is the only word I can think of, desks that were donated to us to give us enough room to have an actual schoolhouse here. Now, the one-room schoolhouse is unique because you have first grade in the front, 8th grade in the back. So you're basically learning the same subjects year after year. You're listening to the teacher teach the other grades, but you are concentrating on your own grade. And the way it's set up is we kind of put these are the original slate boards, by the way, chalkboards. So the teacher would put your school project for the day on the chalkboard, and then that's what you would work from. So every day she would come in, and every grade had a different subject to work with. Now, the one good thing was that, of course, back in that day, from the 1860s up until the 1900s, or late 1800s, you didn't have any homework. And when I asked the children when they come to visit, why do you think that is? And they don't have an answer. I said, well, because up until 1878, we didn't have electricity, and all you had at home was to work with candlelight, and that's not good for your eyes. So they basically did their homework in school, and then the next morning they were tested on what they had learned the day before. If you were a problem child, they would probably sit you in the front right next to the teacher's desk, and you would have to sit there and be quiet for the whole day, and then of course the teacher would send home a note to your parents, and probably a visit from the teacher would be in order after school. The school bell is in the back of the room. The bell was rung. The one under the window is the original school bell to this building. The one in the corner is an actual church bell from somewhere in the town, but we don't know exactly where. But this was rung a half hour before school started. School went from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you had a half hour as soon as you heard this bell to get to school. If you were late to school, it could give you a demerit, or you could be, depending on what the day was like. The bell is very loud, and I will show you how loud it is. So it could be heard probably a couple miles away, depending on the air currents and all that. We did have one student who lived 5 miles away who walked to school every day. So usually the students were within a mile or two of the schoolhouse, and the only way to get to school was to walk. Your horses were used at the farm for your crops and things like that. And of course you had jobs to do at home before you got to school. So you would have to maybe help mom in the kitchen with breakfast, and then clean up the dishes and all that. The boys would have to go out and get the animals started for the day, milk the cows, pick up the eggs from the chickens. So there were all kinds of chores to do before you went to school, and there were chores to do when you got home from school. Another reason why homework was not as important. Homework was done basically in the school. And of course, memorization was a big part of the school day. You had to learn everything by memory because there weren't books to take home to study. Again, you didn't have electricity, and they just weren't, was not enough money for the books. The students had to pay, or the parents had to pay for the students to go to school. Each subject was approximately $2.50 per semester. Now, there were 2 semesters. There was fall and winter, and then winter and summer. The school day was a full day, 8 to 4, and the school year was from September through August. They got 2 weeks off in the fall for harvest. They got 2 weeks off in the spring for planting. And there might have been times when the student would have to stay home and help his dad with farm chores. So that, again, was an excused absence. On the absent list, or on the attendance list, the teacher would mark down the weather report for the day. It would give her a better idea of why you missed a certain amount of days in a row, if you were sick, or if there was bad weather. Of course, if there was a blizzard, you probably couldn't get to school. So you were out for 2 or 3 days. Again, it was all dependent on the weather and what the situation was at home. So there are a couple of stories about this particular schoolhouse, and the one story that I like to tell is about Laura Donovan. Now, in Freehold Township, we have a school named after Laura Donovan, and Laura Donovan was part of a very large family. I think she had 6 brothers and sisters, and every time a brother and sister would go off to school for September, she would just pester her parents no end to try and get to go to school also. Well, she was too young. When she became 4 years old, she was so excited and upset that her father actually went to the school board and to the teacher and said, "Is there any way I can start my daughter early?" So they agreed that she was a child very ready to learn. So she started her education at the age of 4. She graduated this schoolhouse at the age of 12. She then went on to normal school, which was Trenton State College. And she went there for 2 years, got her teaching degree at the age of 14, came back to Georgia Road School and taught here from the age of 14 until she retired in her 70s. It's one of the reasons there is a school named after Laura Donovan. She was a very adept child, and she was great with the children. They all loved Mrs. Donovan. There is a funny story about one of the students was Parker Bone. Parker Bone was a student who lived not too far away, and he had several brothers, and he was kind of a precocious child. So the district nurse was coming around to give shots for TB, and he didn't want a shot. So he proceeded to run out the door and climb the flagpole. And he sat on the top of the flagpole, and he wouldn't come down. Well, he stayed there all day, and it was time to go home from school, but we couldn't go home from school because he wasn't in the school, and he wouldn't come down from the nurse was still there. She had to give him that shot. So he finally relented about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and said, all right, I'm coming down, but I'm not going to have the shot. No, we're not going to give you the shot. Well, as he's coming down the flagpole, the nurse gave him the shot. So all the effort that he put into climbing the flagpole didn't mean a thing. So that's one of the funny stories that came out of this. If you notice in the windows, the panes of glass, I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but they are hand-blown glass. And this particular window has someone's autograph. And I can't really read what it says, but it's Janice Bernard or James Bernard, Friday, May, I believe it's May 9th, 1913. Oh, time flies. Jason Bernard, Friday, May 9th, 1913. Probably got a few demerits for doing that. Probably had to do a few things extra because that was not something you did. But it's interesting that we still have his autograph. As I said, all of the window panes, or most of them, are hand-blown, original glass, original to the building, 1862. We do have a complete set of the history of the Civil War, and the bookcase is over there. The bookcase was built by an Eagle Scout again. The teacher's desk was built by an Eagle Scout. This particular desk over here was Laura Donovan's desk, and her chair. That was her desk for the time that she was here as the teacher. This is called a heater, and what it does is it wraps around the potbelly stove, and it's supposed to keep the building warmer as if it were a furnace. And what the children would do when they came in the wintertime, they would put their jars of soup or something around. I think up here there is like a shelf. They would keep it near this to keep their soup warm for lunch. This is kind of something I've never really seen before, but it did work. And again, this building was in operation until 1959, when all the one-room schoolhouses in Freehold Township closed down in 1937. They were all consolidated into the West Freehold School. But then they ran out of room in, I believe, 1940, and they opened up Georgia Road again until 1959. And again, Laura was teaching here. Mostly this is for special needs children. And we finally closed in 1959. It was used for other things after that. It was also used in the beginning by the Quakers. The Quakers were actually deeded the land in the very beginning, and they used it as a church, and also The First Assembly of God Church, which is on the other corner from us, used this church for their services in the beginning of their congregation starting. So this building has seen a lot, and we hope to preserve, we have preserved everything. It has a new roof, we have new window shutters, we fixed the windows so they can actually open now. We have electricity installed, and hopefully this building will stand another 200 and some years. Thank you for joining us.